For 13 years, it never stopped sending. Every single day, from over 1 billion miles away, it whispered back to us photographs no human eye had ever seen. Oceans hidden under ice, storms the size of entire planets, a world where it rains liquid gasoline. And then, one morning, the whisper stopped. The last images it ever captured are not what NASA expected. Because in its final hours, as it fell toward the planet it had spent its whole life studying, Cassini turned its camera around one last time. And what it saw in those closing moments forced scientists to rewrite what they thought they knew about our solar system. This is the story of a machine that was ordered to destroy itself, and the final photographs that shocked the world. Stay with me until the end, because the very last thing Cassini did before it died is the part almost nobody talks about. And once you understand it, you'll never look at Saturn the same way again. To understand why these final images matter so much, you have to go back to the very beginning, back to a time before smartphones, before social media, before most of the people watching this were even born. October 15th, 1997. On that night, a rocket tore itself off the coast of Florida carrying one of the most ambitious machines humanity had ever built. Its name was Cassini. It was the size of a school bus. It weighed nearly 6 tons. And it was pointed at a target so far away that the light from it takes over an hour to reach us. Its destination? Saturn, the jewel of our solar system. But here's the thing most people don't realize. Cassini didn't fly straight there. It couldn't. Saturn is simply too far, nearly 1 billion miles away. No rocket on Earth was powerful enough to just go. So engineers did something almost unbelievable. They used the planets themselves as slingshots. Cassini swung past Venus, not once, but twice. It came screaming back past Earth. It slingshotted around Jupiter. Each planet's gravity flung it faster and faster, like a stone in a cosmic sling. It took 7 years and a journey of 2.2 billion miles just to arrive. And when it finally did, on July 1st, 2004, it had to thread a needle no one had ever threaded before. To enter orbit, Cassini had to fly through a gap in Saturn's rings. Those rings look soft and smooth from far away. But up close, they're made of billions of chunks of ice and rock, some the size of a grain of sand, some the size of a house, all orbiting at thousands of miles per hour. A single collision the size of a pea could have ended the entire mission in an instant. For 96 agonizing minutes, the spacecraft fired its engine and slipped through that gap. And back on Earth, in a room in California, engineers who had given a decade of their lives to this machine sat in total silence, waiting. Because of the distance, they weren't watching it happen live. They were watching the past. Whatever Cassini did, it had already done it 80 minutes ago. By the time the signal arrived, the spacecraft's fate was already sealed. They just didn't know it yet. And then, the signal came through. Cassini was in orbit around Saturn, and the greatest exploration mission of a generation was about to begin. But nobody in that room, not one of them, knew that 13 years later, the same machine would send back a set of final images so haunting that grown scientists would weep at their desks. For the next 13 years, Cassini did nothing but explore. And what it found didn't just add to our knowledge of Saturn, it completely rewrote it. Let me show you what I mean. This tiny moon is called Enceladus. It's smaller than the state of Arizona. From a distance, it looks like a boring, frozen snowball, just another dead rock in the dark. Before Cassini, that's exactly what scientists assumed it was. They were catastrophically wrong. Because when Cassini flew over its south pole, it saw something impossible. Enormous geysers, plumes of water ice, blasting hundreds of miles up into space. Dozens of them, jetting out through cracks in the surface that scientists nicknamed tiger stripes. Water being launched into space from a moon that everyone had written off as dead. Cassini did something no one thought possible. It flew directly through those plumes. It tasted them. What it found stunned the scientific world. Salt, organic molecules, and most incredibly of all, evidence of hydrothermal activity. The exact same kind of chemistry we find at the bottom of Earth's oceans, near volcanic vents, the very places where some scientists believe life on our own planet may have first begun. Underneath that frozen shell, Enceladus is hiding a global ocean of liquid water, warm, salty, and chemically alive. Think about that for a second. A moon so small you could drive across it in a day, hiding an ocean with more water than all of Earth's seas combined. And in that ocean, possibly, the ingredients for life. But Enceladus was only the beginning, because Cassini carried a passenger. Tucked onto its side was a small European probe called Huygens. And on January 14th, 2005, Cassini released it, and Huygens fell toward the largest moon of Saturn. A mysterious, orange, cloud-covered world called Titan. For centuries, no one had ever seen Titan's surface. Its thick atmosphere hid everything. It was a locked room in our own solar system. Huygens parachuted down through those clouds for 2.5 hours, its camera recording everything. And as the haze finally parted, it saw riverbeds, channels, shorelines, a landscape shaped by flowing liquid exactly like Earth. But there was one impossible detail. On Titan, it's minus 290 degrees Fahrenheit. Water there is frozen harder than steel, so the rivers and lakes and seas that Cassini and Huygens discovered weren't made of water at all. They were made of liquid methane and ethane. On Titan, it rains gasoline. Titan is the only other place in the entire solar system besides Earth with stable liquid on its surface, rivers that flow, seas with waves, rain that falls from the sky, an alien Earth hiding in plain sight. And then there was Saturn itself. Cassini flew over the planet's north pole and it found something that shouldn't exist. A hexagon, a perfect six-sided storm, wider than two Earths side by side, spinning at the top of the planet. A shape with straight edges and sharp corners carved into the clouds of a gas giant. It's so strange that scientists are still arguing about how it forms to this day. Cassini discovered new moons. It watched a giant storm wrap all the way around the planet. It captured Saturn's auroras dancing at its poles. It photographed the rings in a detail so fine you could see individual waves rippling through the ice. For 13 years, it was our eyes at Saturn. It sent back more than 400,000 images. It made discoveries that will fill textbooks for the next 100 years. And it was still working perfectly. Which raises a very uncomfortable question. If Cassini was still healthy, still sending data, still doing everything right, why did NASA decide to destroy it? By 2017, Cassini had a problem. And it wasn't a broken part. It wasn't a failing camera. It was something far simpler and far more final. It was running out of fuel. Cassini needed propellant to steer, to point its camera, to adjust its orbit, to keep its antenna aimed at Earth. And after 20 years in space and billions of miles traveled, its tanks were nearly empty. Soon, it would have just enough left for a few final maneuvers. After that, it would drift. Uncontrollable, silent, blind. Now, here's where the story takes a turn that most people find genuinely surprising. Remember Enceladus? The moon with a hidden ocean and the ingredients for life? And Titan with its rivers and rain? NASA now believed these moons might actually be habitable, that somewhere in those dark oceans there could be, right now, living things. And that created a terrifying responsibility. Because if NASA simply let Cassini run out of fuel and drift, there was a real chance that one day, years, maybe centuries later, the dead spacecraft could crash into Enceladus or Titan. And Cassini had been built on Earth. Despite being sterilized, it might still carry microscopic Earth bacteria clinging to its surface. If those Earth microbes reached an alien ocean, they could contaminate it. They could take over. And any future mission that went looking for alien life would never be able to tell what was truly alien and what was just a stowaway from Earth. Humanity would have polluted an alien world before we ever truly explored it. NASA refused to let that happen. So they made a decision that was equal parts brilliant and heartbreaking. They would not let Cassini drift. They would not let it become a threat. Instead, they would command it to dive directly into Saturn itself, to plunge into the crushing atmosphere of the planet it loved and burn up completely, vaporized, every atom of it, so that not a single Earth microbe could ever survive to contaminate those precious moons. They called it the Grand Finale, but NASA is nothing if not clever. If Cassini had to die, they were going to make its death the most scientifically valuable moment of the entire mission. So for the final 5 months, they sent Cassini on 22 daring orbits, diving through the narrow, unexplored gap between Saturn's cloud tops and its innermost ring. A region no spacecraft had ever entered, a place so dangerous that they saved it for last, precisely because they no longer had anything to lose. And on each of those dives, Cassini saw things no human had ever seen. It flew closer to Saturn than ever before. It measured the planet's gravity and magnetic field with impossible precision. It weighed the rings for the very first time, and discovered they may be far younger than anyone believed, possibly only 100 million years old, which means the dinosaurs may have walked an Earth where Saturn had no rings at all. It captured the tops of the clouds, the swirling storms, the delicate structure of the rings from inches away. And then came the final day, September 15th, 2017, the day Cassini was going to die. But before the end, on September 14th, the day before, Cassini did something profoundly human. It turned its camera around. It took one last look at everything it had come to know. These are the final images. It photographed Saturn one final time, the whole planet wrapped in its rings, glowing in the dark. A goodbye portrait of the world it had orbited for 13 years. It captured Enceladus, the little moon with the hidden ocean, setting behind Saturn's edge, as if the moon that had shocked the world was quietly slipping away, out of frame, forever. It looked back at Titan one last time, the alien Earth, the world of methane rain, and then it did the most haunting thing of all. It pointed its camera down at a single specific point on Saturn's night side, a patch of darkness on the cloud tops. To anyone else, it would look like nothing, just shadow, but it wasn't nothing. That spot was the exact place where, in a matter of hours, Cassini would enter the atmosphere and be destroyed. Cassini photographed its own grave. That image, a rough monochrome shot of an empty patch of Saturn, is the last complete image Cassini ever took. It's not the most beautiful photo in its collection, it's not the most colorful, but it might be the most powerful, because the spacecraft aimed its final gaze at the very place it knew it was about to die, and it sent that picture home to us. Then it turned away. It rotated its big antenna to face Earth, and it began to fall. As it dove into the upper atmosphere, Cassini did something no spacecraft had ever done at Saturn. Instead of just taking pictures, it opened its instruments and began to taste the planet directly, sampling the gases of Saturn's atmosphere in real time and beaming the data back to Earth as fast as it possibly could. It was, in a sense, doing science with its dying breath. Every second, transmitting brand new measurements of a place humanity had never touched, racing against its own destruction to send us just a little more knowledge before the end. But Saturn's atmosphere fought back. As Cassini fell deeper, the friction grew violent. The spacecraft's thrusters fired at full power, straining to keep its antenna locked on Earth, to keep that lifeline of data flowing for as long as humanly possible. For a minute, then another, it held on, fighting, pointing home, sending, until the atmosphere finally overwhelmed it. The thrusters could no longer keep it steady. The antenna began to drift off Earth, and the signal began to fade. Now here is the part almost nobody talks about, the part I promised you at the very beginning. And once you understand it, this entire story changes. Because of the distance between Saturn and Earth, Cassini's final signal had to travel across 1.5 billion miles of empty space to reach us. And even at the speed of light, the fastest thing in the universe, that journey takes about 83 minutes. Let that sink in. The engineers sitting in that control room, watching the signal on their screens, waiting for the end, were not watching Cassini die in real time. They were watching a ghost. By the time Cassini's final transmission reached Earth, the spacecraft itself had already been gone for 83 minutes. It had already burned up, already been torn apart, already become a part of Saturn forever. The signal they were watching was coming from a machine that no longer existed. For over an hour, a dead spacecraft's voice kept arriving at Earth. A message from a friend who was already gone, still crossing the darkness, still saying, "I'm here, I'm still here, I'm still sending." And then, at 4:55 in the morning, California time, the line went flat. Loss of signal. Cassini was gone. There was no applause. Not like the day it arrived. The engineers, many of whom had spent their entire careers, 20 years or more on this one machine, simply sat in silence. Some of them cried, they hugged, they stood and stared at the flat line, at the empty screen, saying goodbye to something that had become, in every way that mattered, a member of their family. A machine had died, and it broke their hearts. But here's what I want you to understand before you go. Cassini didn't fail. Cassini didn't crash by accident. Cassini was not lost. Cassini was given the noblest ending we could possibly give it. It sacrificed itself, deliberately on our command, to protect the very worlds it had discovered, to keep 2 alien oceans pure and untouched, so that one day we might return and search them for life without ever having to wonder whether we brought that life with us. Cassini died so that Enceladus and Titan could stay clean. And its final images, that goodbye portrait of Saturn, that last glimpse of Enceladus slipping away, that haunting photograph of its own grave, those aren't just pictures. They're a message from a machine that spent 13 years teaching us that the solar system is stranger, wetter, and far more alive than we ever dared to imagine. Somewhere out there, right now, on a tiny frozen moon 1 billion miles away, there is an ocean. Warm, salty, chemically alive, waiting. And we only know it's there because one machine built by human hands flew into the dark, discovered it, and then gave its own life to protect it. That is the story of Cassini, and those are the final images that shocked the world. If this story moved you even a little, do me one favor. Take a second and imagine being one of those engineers in that room, watching a ghost's final signal cross 1.5 billion miles of darkness just to say goodbye. Then tell me in the comments, if you could send one more message back to Cassini, what would it be? I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, the real jaw-dropping truths hidden at the edges of our solar system, subscribe and hit the bell, because the next one might just change how you see the sky above you. Until then, keep looking up.